Mes chers camarades, bien le bonjour. Quand on imagine un cowboy, on pense très vite à Clint Eastwood ou à John Wayne. En tout cas, le visage qui pop dans notre cerveau, c'est rarement un Mexicain. Et pourtant, on va le voir aujourd'hui, c'est précisément de cette région dont sont issus les vrais cowboys. Près de la ville de San Antonio, au bord d'une arène où s'entraînent les charros, j'ai rencontré l'historien Francis Galàn, un spécialiste de l'histoire du Texas. Je l'ai interviewé pour comprendre les origines historiques du cow-boy dans un documentaire plus large sur cette figure mythique de l'Ouest qui est dispo actuellement sur la plateforme de France TV. Ce que je vous propose donc d'écouter aujourd'hui, c'est l'interview intégrale de Francis, dont j'ai tiré une petite séquence pour ce documentaire. C'est non seulement un crack sur le sujet, mais en plus c'était un bonhomme absolument adorable, et vraiment c'était un pur plaisir de partager un petit moment avec lui. Alors bon visionnage. It's pretty impressive, c'est impressionnant.
Oh yes, yes, and also impressive to see you that you were practicing with the charro there for a little bit.
Oh,
And trying to do the.
merci, merci. J'espère être meilleur dans 10 ou
But
15 ans.
that takes practice, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. C'est assez étrange parce que j'ai l'impression de voir des cow-boys, mais c'est pas des cow-boys.
Right. It's not like the image that's portrayed, say, in Hollywood and the Western films of the United States. Here is really deep Texas, South Texas, which is really like the birthplace of the cowboy in the United States. But that has a very deep, deep history in Mexico and goes back hundreds of years back to the Iberian Peninsula. So you're right, it's not what we normally associate with the American cowboy.
Et on les appelle cow-boys?
Vaquero, cowboy, and charro. So it's several different terms. And as a matter of fact, throughout Latin America, you have the llaneros of Venezuela, you have the vaqueros, you have the, in Brazil, you have the gauchos in Argentina, so it's all over the Americas. And here, you have the charros that began a tradition coming from central and western Mexico. And with the whole movement to the northern frontier of Mexico, you have the emergence of the vaquero who works on the land. And the charros that are really have more skills, showmanship, riding skills with the lasso. And so there is some differences there. You know, the cowboy tradition that dates back to the Iberian Peninsula, the cattle, the horses, the sheep, the pigs, which also brings in this era of the Mozaraban, the Moors, when Iberia was al-Andalus. And so there is this really deep tradition of ranching that came from Spain to the Americas and in Mexico for the past 500 years, the development of ranching. And as the Spanish expanded to the northern frontier, you needed the rancho as one of the institutions to be able to manage the space because it is such a vast space. And you have in that development the vaquero who ends up essentially maintaining that, and they are the workers on the ranch, if you will.
Donc du coup, les vaqueros,
Yes.
c'est les ancêtres
Yes.
des cow-boys.
They are the ancestors of the American cowboy. And many people may not see the Hispanic or Mexican roots of the American cowboy, but they are right here in South Texas, right here in South San Antonio.
Mais en fait, il y a 200 ans ici, c'était pas les États-Unis.
Right, so then it's really not until after 1836 that you have the beginnings of the American cowboy and everything that they would have learned of the ranching traditions they all would have learned from the vaquero, from the Mexican cowboys, the Tejano cowboys, and that is something in which it expands upon this very deep tradition of ranching on the frontier.
À cette époque, du coup, la plupart des cow-boys, c'était des Mexicains.
So in the early 19th century, you have the majority of the vaqueros who are Mexican, Mexicano, And over time, and its origins is also diverse in Mexico too, because you have that Arab influence from Spain, you have the African influence from North and West Africa, and that is coming to the Caribbean, that is coming to Mexico, and then in Mexico, the tradition of like the charro developing from North and Central Mexico, and then in the North, the vaquero. That is something that continues to adapt to the environment, and many of the people who came here, um, they're coming mostly from Coahuila initially, which is a border state here of Texas in Mexico. And then you have others who are coming from many different parts of Mexico as well. So the majority, yes, are Mexicano, are Tejano. Um, those that are born here in Texas are referred to by the 19th century as Tejano.
C'était quoi le travail quotidien des vaqueros?
Basically, for the vaquero, it would be to uh, work as a ranch hand, taking care of the cattle, making sure they're fed, um, and um, and and also the uh, running of the cattle, the cattle drives, if you will. That is something that really develops in the 19th century, and a lot of those more famous cattle drives that happened in the later 19th century, the Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight Loving Trail, the Western Trail, all these that end up going to the north to places in Kansas, New Mexico, Colorado. A lot of those start gathering here. And a lot of those vaqueros are bringing cattle from even closer to the border in South Texas. And then they make their way north to where the trails start to become more developed. And so then they may go through Fort Worth, which has a heavy American cowboy influence on the town.
Ici au Texas, en fait, on est sur une terre qui a vu beaucoup de mix de cultures. Il y a des gens qui viennent de partout.
Yes, there is a lot of, well, and even in Mexico, from the Spanish period of the mixing of peoples and cultures, and in the 19th century, you have not only the Mexican cowboy and then the Anglo-American, but you also end up having African-American cowboys who end up forming maybe as much as 1/4 of the American cowboys in the West. And so you have the Hispanic, the African-American, and the Anglo-Americans who are all part of this cowboy culture, if you will.
L'influence mexicaine, du coup, elle est énorme sur les cowboys.
Yes, definitely. And the terms that are used that come from the Spanish, words for the rodeo, which is the roundup, and that is a word that you hear everywhere in Texas, and here in San Antonio in February they have their rodeo, Houston their rodeo in March, and it just goes on and on. And so then that is the roundup, and then other terms that are used, including the lasso, which is the rope, but also the part of the uniform with the spurs, the boots, the chaps, all of that is coming from Mexico, and the ruggedness of the frontier, and that is so much that feeds into what ends up being part of the American cowboy, and it was already there.
Et si du coup, les cowboys qui étaient avant des vaqueros
Yeah.
mexicains, comment est-ce que les
I'm-
Américains sont venus prendre ce travail?
It's not something that happens overnight necessarily, because during the colonial era in Texas under Spain, even all the way over to the border with Louisiana, which was a French colony, you have cattle drives, expeditions that are going all the way to Louisiana, and they're bringing cattle, they're bringing horses, sheep, oxen, goats. And so then um, you have then over time, as more people settle and they settle on these lands, they end up developing this ranching, adopting to this kind of ranching culture in addition to farming. So you have both farming and ranching. And interestingly, in today, especially in South Texas, you have that doubling of the ranching and farming traditions that overlap. Um, but over time, then, as in some cases, Anglos who marry into Mexican or Tejano families, they end up becoming part of that tradition. Or politically and economically, they acquire ranches in South Texas. And so then you end up having this expansion of the ranching cowboy culture, if you will, here in Texas.
Ici, c'est vraiment une terre de
Yeah.
rencontres, hein, puisque finalement, ça a été l'Espagne, le Mexique et puis les États-Unis.
That's what they refer to as the Six Flags of Texas. There's even a amusement park, called the Six Flags of Texas. Everybody, oh, like that, and that's go have fun, go have rides, But those are the Six Flags, and France is actually one of the flags.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because of LaSalle. We were talking earlier about some of the early French presence in North America, and especially in this region. That is the whole reason why the Spanish even came out in the first place, because they saw the French coming in, and it's like, well, we have a lot of silver in Mexico, and we're trying to make sure we're able to control that trade. And the rancho really becomes one of the institutions to help to manage that vast space on the frontier. And then as you have the mixing of peoples and cultures over time, it continues to grow and to be adapted, across sovereignties, across different flags. And so in a way, that cowboy culture, if you will, that has its roots with the vaquero, is really adaptable across cultures, across groups of people. Yes, so then the Spanish had established the Provincia de Texas, the province of Texas, by 1716. By 1821, Mexico wins its independence against Spanish rule. For 15 years, Texas is under the Mexican flag, and for Mexico, it's like an expansion of what Spain had done before, but a lot more difficult, because by then the United States has grown much bigger, and it's coming into conflict with the borders of Texas under Spain and then Mexico. And in 1835, 1836, there is this rebellion, this revolution in Texas against Mexican rule, but from a Mexican perspective, it's part of a civil war in Mexico, because it's one state wanting to rebel in the north, like Zacatecas in further south, or in other states of Mexico, so that it is one of a number of states that are trying to break away from centralized power in Mexico City. In other words, it's before even the United States has its own civil war, in which you have the states of the South wanting to break away from the North. And so then by 1836 to 1849, Texas is a republic, and it is an independent country for 9 years. And during that time, you had Texas trying to continue this government attempt to bring in colonies of immigrants from Europe, just like it happened under Mexico when Stephen F. Austin came in and established his 300 colonists on the lower Brazos and Colorado River. And of course, our state capital is named after Austin. And so then by 1845, Texas, no, we can't stay as an independent country. It's too much trouble, right? But you have difficulties on the Indian frontier. You have Santa Anna, who keeps coming back to power in Mexico, saying he's going to come back and reconquer Texas. Eventually, by there's debt as well, a great amount of debt that Texas has to pay off to foreign nations. And so by 1845, Texas is admitted as a state, as the 28th state, and it is admitted as a slave state in the United States. And 16 years later, the Civil War. The country essentially is at war with itself. And some historians will argue that the admission of Texas into the Union in 1845 was really that kind of road to that Civil War. So that is going on politically as you have this whole cowboy culture and just this kind of transference of the cowboy culture, and as well families becoming some families that are intermarrying with Anglos, others who are losing their lands as well, and so that is up until 1861, 65, the Civil War, and then 1865, Texas essentially is readmitted into the Union.
Aujourd'hui, quel est le pourcentage de la population qui a des origines mexicaines?
Well, in Texas, the majority, there's a majority Hispanic population here in San Antonio that has always been throughout its history. In Texas, it's become even more Hispanic populated. In a lot of the major urban areas, especially, there's a lot more of the Hispanic population. But today it's a lot more diverse too, because you're also talking about Latinos, many who may be coming not just from Mexico, but from Central America, South America. And so that population that is Latino is a lot more diverse. But across the United States, you're really looking at California, New York, Florida, and Texas, that you have much more of the Hispanic population. And a lot of that is also concentrated in major urban areas. But there's still ranchos throughout South Texas that are still family owned, despite, history that has happened, good and bad, for a lot.
Et finalement, ce qu'on voit ici aujourd'hui, c'est un petit peu un bout d'histoire, quoi.
It is, and so this is great to see, and it really makes you proud to see this. And for me as a historian, and always just reading in the books and the archives, and then to come out here and to meet Edmundo Rios and to hear from him, it's like, he starts making me, start to raise goosebumps just talking about it, because I don't normally talk about that. It's like I read about it and then I present my research, but this is like living history,
Merci aux équipes de TSVP, la société de production avec qui j'ai travaillé sur ce projet et qui ont monté ces interviews. Vous pouvez retrouver mon documentaire sur les cowboys, mais aussi celui sur les samouraïs que j'ai tourné au Japon directement sur la plateforme France TV. Je vous mets un petit lien en description et commentaire. À plus.